Welcome to a World History 1 lecture video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the peopling of the world. In other words, we're going to be looking at an era that many historians have deemed to be prehistory. You'll see that in some textbooks. And this idea of prehistory is this question of how we understand the world before there were written documents. So as far as prehistory, it was developed by archaeologists. Writing is actually relatively new and was only really developed around 5,000 years ago. For historians, what they typically do is that they go in and they are going to be looking at these documents, so written sources, to better understand how people got to where they are now. So in this time before there are written documents, you can see that archaeology has to help answer a lot of questions. You can also see that geology as well as botany help to fill in the blanks of history. The goal of this particular section is to better understand the beginnings of civilization. So we're going to be looking at why hominids move, where they originate from, how they survive, and also at the end we're going to start to look a little bit more at the development of agriculture. Many historians, as well as archaeologists and anthropologists, have argued that early humans developed in Africa. This has led to what is known as the out of Africa theory. With this theory, and you can see the map on the screen here, it is believed that while humans developed in Africa, over time, very, very slowly, they began to move to different parts of the world and to inhabit those parts as well. Later in this video, we will talk about these various areas that they reach, but first I want us to think a little bit about how and why. So as far as what we're looking at, we use the word hominid to refer to the ancestors of modern Homo sapiens. Around 8 million years ago, they began to walk upright. Some have argued that this would have led them to leaving more forested areas where they would have originally lived. Others, however, have argued that they went to more savanna-like regions in Africa because of the climate. Humans now, as well as in the past, have reacted to the climate and the world they live in. In the time known as the Pliocene epoch, animals with adaptations like angled knees and arched feet began to survive. You can also see that those with curved fingers and long arms did not survive. So, around 2.4 million years later, they start to use tools, but with all of these factors in mind, we can see that people are starting, these hominids, to move out of forested areas, and they are beginning to spread out. The next epoch or sort of time period of this human history that people have begun to identify is going to be known as the Pleistocene epoch. And in this particular epoch, we can see that humans are going to start interacting more with their environment. So they're starting to make more tools, but they're also acting in response to their environment. So during this time frame, you are going to have 25 plus periods of warming. And what this means is that there is actually going to be a drop in the sea level. This is going to allow people to migrate to places like Australia and the Americas, and it also means that there are going to be more different types of climates that are going to be throughout the world at this time. As we will see, people do have to start looking and figuring out how to survive in various climates. So how you live in a very cold region is going to be different from how you live in a very warm region. The same is true today. If you live in a place that is very cold, you have to wear warmer clothing. You might be limited as to the different types of foods that you are able to grow. Whereas if you live in a warmer environment or an environment that's a little bit more temperate, you can see you would wear warmer clothes, or maybe you have seasons. And then you can also see that you're going to have more of an opportunity to grow different types of crops. The same is definitely true of early humans, and we will see that. Now, we are skipping over in this lecture a lot of the sort of evolution of how humans came to be the modern humans, just for time's sake, but there are plenty of great videos that are out there for that. I will try to link some of those below. But what I want us to think about now is just this idea of what makes us human. So what is it that has made us human as opposed to other types of animals? Scientists have agreed, so scientifically speaking, humans have the ability to plan ahead, and this plays a role in indicating human behavior. They also argue that it lies in the ability to modify tools that humans have. It is also seen that humans are able to create different types of networks for trade, and they also practice making art. So, the idea of making art is that it is going to be ritualistic at times, but it's also sometimes just going to be something that is aesthetically pleasing as well. With humans, other types of behavior that have been noticed is this idea of burying the dead, as well as the ability to speak and formulate language. Now, one thing I want us to look at, and I have a link here, and I'm going to show it to you in just a second, is to better understand how humans are spreading out and the time frame in which this takes place. What you'll see here as it starts to play out is going to be sort of a visual representation of this out of Africa theory. Thanks to National Geographic, we have this very, very great image. We can see that some of the first places that humans are going to reach are going to be the upper reaches of Africa. We can also see that this area right here in the Arabian Peninsula is going to be reached. As far as we see Europe as well as Asia, you can see this is the time frame, so around 45,000 to 35,000 years ago for both of these. And then we can also see that within this time frame, people are also going to be spreading to Australia. And we will talk more about that in just a second. With this, we can see some of the last places where humans are going to spread around 20,000 to 15,000 years ago are going to be parts of the Americas, and South America will be the last area that we see right here, and that is going to be around 15,000 to 12,000. Now, these are the regions that we're going to be talking about today. In a later video, we will also start to talk a little bit more about the Pacific Ocean and the different islanders that go to those oceans. Here we can see that people are spreading out as recent as 25,000 years ago. So we're going to just watch this one more time as it plays out. I just want you to pay attention to how humans are starting to spread. Pay attention also to the speed of these arrows. I think that can be very telling as well. So much, much quicker with the latter parts of the movement of humans spreading out. So at first we can assume that it is very methodical. It is something that takes place over a very, very long period of time. And later humans do start to travel a bit more quickly. I have a still shot of this particular map up here for you to look at if you would like to. But the first place we're going to look at as far as the settling of the world is going to be Asia. So the first humans who established long-lasting settlements as they began to leave, Asia is one of the first places that they come to. Archaeologists found tools, but not humans, that dated back to around 74,000 BCE in India. The 215 stone tools were almost identical to some that were also found in Africa. This is a clue about where they come from and also further supports the out of Africa theory. The tools were found under volcanic ash, which helped them to date the objects by using this carbon dating that they have. Some believe that the temperature of the world lowered around 73,000 years ago because of a volcano eruption leading to people spreading out. Others believe that there was a land bridge on the coast of Africa near Somalia that allowed them to cross into the Arabian Peninsula. They hugged the coast and ate shellfish and tropical fruits. They likely did so without realizing that they had left one land mass and gone to another. But we can see these earliest humans traveling, and again you can see it, and we already saw it in the visual, traveling into the Arabian Peninsula and then spreading further into Asia. Historians believe that early humans followed two routes into Europe. One went around the Mediterranean Sea, and the other followed the Danube River into Eastern Europe. Regardless of all of this, we can see that once humans started to migrate into Europe, they began to organize different types of hunts to track migrating animals in the fall to help provide meat during the winter. This is one example of how these humans were able to adjust to the newer and colder climate. They continued to refine the advanced hunting technologies of their African forebears, formed large organized hunting parties that killed big game with sharp-pointed spears. In addition to hunting, the migrants also gathered wild plants. So the earliest people that we see in Europe, they are also having to adjust regardless of just their technology for hunting. So they're hunting different types of animals and also with their hunting parties. But we can also see that they are going to have to create better clothing. It is much colder in this area, meaning that we see humans using different parts of animals, different furs and skins, along with other things occurring naturally in the world around them to create this clothing. In addition to that, I think with Europe, something else we can see that is an indication that they are human are going to be the different types of cave paintings that are going to emerge. Now, a lot of these cave paintings are going to emerge in different parts of France as well as in other parts of Europe. But with these, we can see that Chauvet in southern France has a lot of these cave paintings. It's where I have the picture up here that you're looking at now. And they show the different types of animals that they hunted. So we're not talking about just rabbits or something small like that. They're hunting different types of mammoths, lions, rhinoceroses. You also can see within these paintings, there are some of them that are decorated with different patterns of dots or human handprints. With these dots and handprints, it's impossible for us to know exactly what it is that they mean. It could have just been some sort of artistic expression. If you think about the different art that you see when you go into stores or that you might even have hanging in your own house, sometimes you'll see that it's there for aesthetic reasons. If you have a painting that has a lot of dots or a lot of lines, something more abstract, it's aesthetically pleasing. However, it could have also had some sort of religious significance for these people. We will never know the true answer to this question, but we do know that these paintings are going to be important for understanding these earliest humans in Europe. Now, the furthest that we saw Homo sapiens sort of travel is going to be to Australia from Africa. This is one of the more isolated parts of the world. Australia provides a rich environment for animals, things like kangaroos that are found nowhere else in the world. No animals from Eurasia, except for rodents and modern humans, managed to reach Australia. So these humans must have constructed some sort of rafts or boats in order to get there. As far as these ancient travelers, they probably first made boats for fishing, which they probably did with nets, and then they used the boats to travel longer distances. Although these changes took place gradually, it only took a single generation, it is believed, to travel all the way from Southeast Asia into Australia. Once they reached Australia, the early settlers did not just stay on the coast, and instead they started to move inland very rapidly. This is where we actually get the site of Mungo Man. I have a video link on the screen right here if you'd like to visit that to learn a little bit more about the more recent history of Mungo Man. But what we do know about him is actually how he was buried. Again, another good indication of how humans have their behavior. So the living had arranged the body of Mungo Man carefully, positioning his hands over his crotch. Mungo Man was also buried in a grave colored by this reddish ochre, the same mineral element used to make the ochre implement at the different cave drawings that we saw. But regardless of all of this, we can see that the living deliberately colored the soil around the grave. This is another indicator of what makes us human. This idea of making very deliberate decisions about burials. Now, as far as what this means, we will never know for sure. They did not leave us a written record for us to actually go in and figure out why they used this red ochre, why they positioned him the way that they did. What we do know is that this could have had some sort of religious significance. The defining characteristic of religion is this belief in a divine power or powers that control or influence the environment in people's lives. The most reliable evidence we have is written text to explain religious beliefs. However, this also seems to have been symbolic to the people who did this. The last place we're going to look at today as far as this settlement is going to be the Americas. Now, as far as the Americas, the earliest confirmed human occupation in the Western Hemisphere dates back to around 12,000 BCE. So this is years after the settling of Eurasia, and we also saw that on the map earlier. Accordingly, all human remains found so far in the Americas belong to the Homo sapiens sapiens species, which means that there were no other hominids that had been found in the Americas. And there are questions as to how humans got here. So, one theory, and one that is very commonly believed, is that humans reached America via a land bridge from Siberia to Alaska. So, this is going to be Beringia. So I have this up here where you can see the Bering Strait. And the idea here is that for these humans, what they did is they were actually able to go from this area over here and to cross their way into the Americas. The next sort of explanation of how they traveled, which you also saw in the graphic earlier, is that they would have slowly made their way down the coast in order to reach different areas. As the Earth experienced different periods of coldness, we can see that these bridges do start to emerge, and this theory does have a lot of credibility and also makes sense. As far as where they have found humans, we can see they use a lot of carbon-14 dating. Monteverde is one particular area where they really do start to look at humans, and they can actually date to around 12,000 BCE for the lowest level of footprints that they have been able to find. There are also many interesting stories that have come out recently that are questioning if humans actually made it earlier, but this is going to take many, many more years of research to further find and understand how early humans came to the Americas and how they lived in these very, very early years. Now, the last thing I want to look at before I end this video is going to be the emergence of agriculture. The development of agriculture was a crucial break in the history of humankind. People began to plant seeds in specific locations and raised tame animals that could help them in their harvest. Only when a community has committed to both of these does it become an agricultural society. For example, some groups practice cultivation but not agriculture. This is where they plant seeds and they come harvest them in the fall, but they do not raise crops or animals full time. The first people that learned how to plant seeds, domesticate animals, and cultivate crops were the Natufizuns, who lived in Palestine and southern Syria by around 12,500 BCE. Because they could make more advanced stone tools, we refer to them oftentimes as a Neolithic culture, which translates to New Stone Age. What we've looked at before, these people migrating, making these basic tools, spreading out across the world. This is known as the Paleolithic Age. So now, as you see this agriculture starting to emerge, we see that people are moving into what is known as this Neolithic Age or this New Stone Age. For these people, they began cultivating their first crops, which were figs, around 94,000 BCE. We know this because the figs that they ate did not have good seeds. So what they actually had to do was to plant a branch from a fig tree in the ground. If they had not done this, the plant would have died out the following season. The next crop that they were able to cultivate was grain. Wild grain has weak stems, but they were able to pick seeds from the tallest and strongest of these plants, which helped to create the growth of grains that were easier to harvest and were also easier to get seeds from to plant the next year. These people also mastered the domestication of animals. They first started to keep different animals closer to their homes, and after 7,000 years, you can see the domestication of goats, sheep, as well as cattle. It is suggested that the Natufians lived in groups of around 150 to 200 people. And with this particular group, we can see that they do start to spread out and spread a lot of their ideas. So with this, we can see that agriculture, it's something that definitely takes place over time. We can also see that a lot of the earliest agriculture and what we'll look at in subsequent videos is going to take place in different parts of the Middle East. So for example, the next video that you're going to see is going to be on Mesopotamia. So we'll be looking at that Fertile Crescent region. But I just wanted you to kind of keep in mind with this idea of people being able to domesticate plants as well as animals, and that's how you are going to get agriculture. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you learned a little bit more about these earliest people. I think some of the key takeaways that you should keep in mind for future assignments and just in general are going to be first and foremost this sort of out of Africa theory, thinking back to that graphic that we looked at, and then some of the examples of this earliest hominid and human behavior. So for example, when we looked at Asia, we see they're creating new different types of tools. We see the same thing in Europe, and we also start to see these cave paintings. As far as settling the world in Australia, we have an example of this burial. These are very human behaviors. When we see the Americas, people spreading much more quickly, we can assume that there was a strong degree of communication to organize these movements of people. But with all of that in mind, please leave any questions that you have, and I will see you in the next video.